Hi, welcome to Lights Camera Author. I'm Jim Juno, and I have with me today, he has a new book out. It's entitled Mae West and Her Adonises. The author's name is Michael Gregg Michaud. Welcome, Michael, to Lights Camera Author.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Now, I believe we were on earlier with another one of your books.
Well, it could be. I think this is my ninth book.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize you had that many, but yeah, I remember when we had a We had an interview. Again, it was a Bear Matter Media book, like this one is, and
Yeah.
but it may have been. This is not your first book on Mae West, I believe.
No, this is my third book on Mae West. Each one is, focused on a certain aspect of her career. The life is too big to get into one book, really.
She was
But
large.
I don't remember. I don't remember if we talked about her before, or there's a Salminio book and Diane McBain and Alan Seuss and Marlena Dietrich and
It
Troy
was. You're
Donahue.
right.
I
It
don't
was
remember
Diane.
the.
It was Diane McBain. I remember that. Remember that
Ah,
book. Yeah. It was
hmm.
Diane McBain. Yeah. So, but this one, um, Mae West and Her Adonises. Now, a lot of people will remember Mae West from the movies, even though she only made 11 movies or 12 movies.
Right.
Um,
That's right.
but a lot of people may not realize, and first off, let me tell you, this book is divided into four acts, and each segment deals with a part of her life. So, but a lot of people don't realize that before she became a movie star, Mae West was big on the New York stage, wasn't she?
Yes, that's right. She did vaudeville and even burlesque when she was very young and beginning, but she made her mark on Broadway. She wrote several plays and starred in them. Um, and she became very, very well known. Diamond Lil was her biggest hit. And then a couple of those shows, when they closed on Broadway, she toured around the country. Um, when people have worked on film, if it's been recorded in television, we can continue to see those things. But anyone who works on the stage, um, it's essentially lost unless you were in the audience one night. You didn't see it. And the same goes for her when she reinvented herself again in the mid 1950s with a nightclub act, which was something that she'd never done before. And there's very little, I think there's some bootleg video that Super 8 filmed that a couple of, people in the audience may have recorded. But for the most part, that sort of work is lost as well, unless you were in the audience one night. And for her, it's very interesting because her preference was the stage. She started off as a little girl on the stage. She liked working with a live audience. She worked off of them. And that's where she was most comfortable. Motion pictures made her an international star, made her a lot of money. But as soon as the movies were done, she walked away easily, never missed it, and went right back on the stage. So she had sort of laid low in the 1950s. She was doing summer stock tours and still working on the stage, but she came up with this idea of a nightclub act in Las Vegas. And they offered her a great deal of money at the Sahara Hotel in 1954. So she put together an act. I don't believe that she ever thought that it would tour for almost 5 years. She was used to that sort of work, but I don't think that was in the wheelhouse to begin with. I think that she was interested in going to Vegas for a couple of weeks, and it was close to home, and that would be it. But the act was something that Las Vegas had never seen, which is saying a lot. And
Exactly.
yeah, and So she just was she was making a lot of money and just sort of rolled with it, and then toured from the East Coast to the West Coast, back and forth, and really enjoyed herself. And people absolutely ate it up. The act was something that her fans would expect. But she introduced something, she said, for the women in the audience. She felt that she was all that the men needed to look at who came to see her, but the women, the wives and girlfriends that came with them for the date night, needed something to look at. So she cast a chorus line of titled muscle men who came out on the stage and flexed and posed and wore little bikini briefs, and no one had ever seen anything like that before. She objectified men in a way that had never been done on the stage. Of course, Las Vegas, we always had beautiful showgirls who were topless, but no topless men. And it was something that was shocking and immensely entertaining, and more than memorable, and an enormous success.
And when we say well-built, muscle-bound men, we're talking, I mean, Superman did not have this many muscles. I mean,
oh no, these were Mr. Americas and Mr. Universe and all this stuff. These were really like Greek gods.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Mariska Hargitay's father, Mickey Hargitay, I believe, was one of them.
Yes.
And then also the Dave Du Bois. He was one that
Richard Dubois was
Richard
Mr.
Dubois.
America. And he opened. He was one of the original Muscle Men, and he was. She called him one of the 7 physical wonders of the world. He was a very handsome young man. He was young and an incredible body. I mean, it looked, it was like a Greek god.
Yeah. Yeah. And really, this was now not the muscle-bound men, not the topless men, but back when like saying your Act One, the Knights of Love. I mean, she had a nightclub act where she had men in tuxedos, I believe.
Yes, when she went to Hollywood, she went there to do one movie. She had no intention of staying, but Paramount offered a contract and it was lucrative, so she stayed. But she missed being on the stage. She missed a live audience, which of course you don't have when you're making a movie. So in those days, it was not unusual for the studio, part of the promotion of the movie, to send one or more of the stars of the film out to make a few personal appearances. They didn't usually tour the country early in those early 1930s, but mostly they would be in New York or New Jersey, on the East Coast, sometimes Chicago, and they would put together some sort of a little act, to perform on the stage to accompany the screening of their film. And she jumped at the chance. She wanted to go back to New York, which she missed very much, and put together an act. And she had chorus boys in tuxedos who sang, and she had a little sketch with her African-American maid. And it wasn't very long. The whole thing was probably 15 or 20 minutes. But it was madness because by that time, especially returning to New York, she was really hot stuff. And people stood in line for hours and hours to see her. It was enormously successful. And that little sketch really was the basis for the next 2 personal appearance tours that she did to accompany her films, and also it was the basis of her 1954 nightclub act. It was she of course the men weren't wearing tuxedos anymore,
Right.
but they were up there posing and flexing while she's saying, "I like to do all day what I do all night." Um, and of course, by the 1950s, and especially in a nightclub setting, you could be a little bit more provocative. You could be a little bit more daring and get away with it. And she ran with it.
I think
Um,
I knew the Marx
it
Brothers
was,
did that for their movies that they went on
yeah,
tour.
I think many of them did. And she had a wonderful time. I think it was a very, very fun period of time for her. It was a transitional time in the mid 1950s because her longtime manager and lawyer, Jim Timoney, had suddenly passed away. And he was involved actually in the very beginnings of this, exploring performance in Las Vegas. At that time, very big motion picture stars were appearing in Vegas, Marlene Dietrich and Frank Sinatra, and pulling in a great deal of money. And Jim Timoney thought, Mae West would be perfect for that and could do something that nobody else was doing. And that, of course, was the case. But she
Right.
was she missed him dearly. And this was a wonderful distraction for her. And she had a really great time. And she had a fling with, 21-year-old Mr. America for most of the first year and a half tours. And she enjoyed herself. And the acts were very well reviewed. And the places, they were sold out. They would have additional performances to accommodate the demands. And sometimes it was even extended a day or two or three, so that everybody could get in who wanted to.
And she actually had she was one of the first stars in the nightclub to have an African American woman with her on the stage, Louise Beavers,
Yes,
people may know from the show Beulah.
right. And Louise had done motion pictures as well. Mae West was very fond of Louise, and it was interesting because at that time, many places that they went, Louise had very good billing and very good pay. And many of the places that they went to, the hotels that would accommodate Mae West and other cast members would not allow African Americans to stay in them. So Mae West would always rent a very nice house for Louise and her husband, who often traveled with her. But she loved Louise and treated her, really respectfully. And that's very true. It was unusual for an African American performer to share the stage with a Caucasian performer. And there even, which is even more rare, there are photographs. There's one in the book of the cast and on the stage, and Mae West and Louise Beavers are right in the middle of the picture. So she was very respectful of her and enjoyed her very much.
And she got billing on the marquees also.
Yes, she did.
Matt, I wanted one thing you made clear in your book, and I maybe I should have expected this, but Mae West was a real professional, a stickler almost. Like if you're going to rehearse, this is how it's going to be, and we're going to do it until we get it right. I think
That's
she
right.
even had rehearsals after a show.
She did. Um, she was very, for many performers who make stage their, primary venue, they have a sense very quickly. They develop a sense of what works with an audience because the audiences are different from city to city. And she was keenly aware of that. And on opening night, from one city to the next, she was very aware of how the audience was responding. And she would make small changes in the act to anticipate what the audience was going to be looking for. So that's very true. After the show, they would have a rehearsal and talk about how they're going to tweak it just a bit to suit this new venue. But she was very well rehearsed. In film, it almost looks as though she's ad-libbing. She's so casual and tosses it off in such a way, but she was so rehearsed. And that was something she learned from her early days on the stage. So she just carried that. That was part of her preparation, right up until the end of her performing days.
And a lot of people may not realize that not only was she a star of the movies and the plays, but she also wrote a lot of the movies, a lot of the plays, the dialogue. She actually produced them herself, which was for a woman in the 1930s and well, even up to her career 19 until 1959 when the nightclub scene ended. That just wasn't done by a female.
Yes, that's right. She was very powerful. She did write her own plays on Broadway and was involved in the production and very much involved in casting. When she got into Hollywood, it was a little bit different, but based on the success of her first film, her first starring vehicle, She Done Him Wrong, which saved Paramount from bankruptcy because it was so popular. And it was even nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture of the Year, believe it or not. But from that point on, they gave her whatever she wanted. She wrote the dialogue for all her films, and sometimes she wrote the story as well, but her skill really was dialogue. And that's not surprising since a play, when you're writing a play, it's all dialogue. So
Right.
that was her. That was her. That was a gift. She really, and no one could write for her. She knew what the character. She had created this character, and she worked to preserve that character right up until the end. Whatever the film may have been or the play, it was still sort of Mae West, dash Diamond Lil. And it was the same in Las Vegas. That was the character. She was, dripping in diamonds and long gowns and an hourglass figure and feathers and boas and all this stuff. And it was Diamond Lil, really,
Yeah.
over and over again.
And even up until the 50s, I mean, this is how much she took part. You write in the book about a marquee that was put up without her knowledge. Big mistake here.
Yes,
Uh,
yes.
it actually said, was it Charles O'Connor presents the Mae West
Yeah,
show? And,
right.
and when
Yeah,
she saw that, she this was like this. No, I'm not. That is not the way it's going to read, and she had them change it right
right.
away.
She did, and she also got rid of him.
Yes, but
Yeah,
the amazing thing is that basically she didn't change her character throughout the years from 1933 to 1959. Like you said, the stage offered her much more freedom. Um, you mentioned a couple of times when the times that she had trouble with the censors was one when she first started on the New York stage when she wrote a play called Sex,
right.
and then on it was a radio show, and she had Charlie McCarthy and Edgar Bergen on it, and she said some things which had double entendre. Um,
Right.
I think one of them was like, I'd like to telling Charlie McCarthy, who was a wooden dummy for Edgar Bergen, for those of you who don't know, said, I'd like for you to come up and play in my wood pile.
Right.
Okay, okay, I can see where that might get her in trouble in 1930s, you know. But then all the way up to the 50s when she was on Person to Person, I believe,
Right.
and she made a comment like, about the mirrored ceilings. I like to see how I'm doing, or something
Right.
like, that
Yes,
one
that's right.
didn't even air. CBS wouldn't even air it up in
Yeah, no,
1959.
that was it was recorded, but I think it was the morning of the day it was supposed to air. The network executives called it off. Um, but she was really that survives, by the way. And if someone is smart enough, you can track it down and watch it. It's great fun to watch. And of course, when you look at it today, it's hard to imagine that it would have been so offensive that they wouldn't even show it. But she was more amused by that than anything else. When the play Sex was rated after over a year, by the way, of pulling in audiences in New York, she was convicted of corrupting the morals of New York City, which she said was the greatest achievement of her life. And it made her a star. And she was a New York Broadway star, and news of that arrest and imprisonment went all around the world.
Yeah,
And it really did make her a star. And then in 1937, you refer to the Chase and Sanborn Hour radio show
that's
hosted
right.
by Victor Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. And she recorded that to promote Every Day's a Holiday. And that recording exists. I mean, it's on records and things and tapes. You can hear it. It's a very funny show. Dorothy Lamour and Don Amici were also on the show. And it's very, very funny. And there is, some double entendre in it. But the real problem was that program was broadcast on a Sunday. And
The church
that's what
crowd. Yeah.
caused, yeah, that's what caused the problem. And it actually it ended up with her being banned from radio for years. But that was the real problem. And she said later, it just more people were listening to her than going to church, and that was a problem for the churches.
I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And now let me ask you this real quick. I mean, with the 1950s show, nowadays, Mae West is also a LGBTQ icon, even though she
Yes.
herself wasn't lesbian. Um,
Right.
was the 1950s show, is that what contributed to that um, to her becoming an icon in the
Well,
LGBTQ?
yeah, I think it's probably part of it, but that started, on Broadway before she ever made it to Hollywood. She wrote a play called The Drag, and it was about a drag ball, and that had a problem they wouldn't even open that on Broadway. But and in the movies, it's interesting because there were several of her films that had scenes featuring a gay character. And even though that was filmed, the censors cut those particular things out of the films. But I think, she supported LGBTQ rights, and they respected her in return. And I'm sure that parading around a stage with Mr. America, 10 Mr. Americas in Speedos, certainly helped the cause. And I think certainly with gay men, I think the attraction, I think there's many different levels to that. But she was an outspoken individual, independent character, and she was flamboyant, and I think, and she was witty and snappy, and I think that all of those things appealed to that community. And when she was beginning her career, the characterization of Mae West, there were two different people. Mae West, the woman, was not the same Mae West, the character that the public was, exposed to. But when she was first beginning in vaudeville, there were many female impersonators, and she was very influenced by that. So when you're watching her, and consequently, she influenced and continues to influence drag performers. And when you look at her, it's very interesting to watch her because she is impersonating a man who's impersonating a woman. That's why her mannerisms are so exaggerated. The hand on the hip and the hand pumping her hair and sashaying. That's not the way a sexy woman necessarily would appear. She looked like, I wouldn't say she looked like a drag queen, that's going a little bit far, but she was so influenced by drag performers that informed her, the character that she created and nurtured until she died. Right through Myra Breckinridge. I mean, she was still doing the same thing, at the end of her life. So,
exactly, yeah.
And she had longevity. That's something else that, that people admire. Someone who sticks to it. They don't give in to age or social pressures or political things. They are who they are, and they just keep on going. And I think that's admirable. Really, anyone would admire that.
She was very progressive for any time. Exactly.
Oh, yeah.
So the book is Mae West and Her Adonises. It's available from Bear Manor Media. You can find it at bearmanormedia.com and also on Amazon and bn.com. The author's name is Michael Gregg Michaud. Michael, I really want to thank you for being on Lights Camera Author today.
Great. Thanks. It was a lot of fun.